Hello, welcome to the video. Paleontology and human history have been intertwined for a long time. A lot of paleontology requires you at times to understand what has come beforehand, such as groundbreaking research papers or famous fossil discoveries. This video is a chapter about mosasaurs in human history taken from a Mega-Video released back in April of this year, covering several topics relating to mosasaurs. To watch the full video, click the link in the description of this one.
Mosasaurus in human history goes back a long time. The first discovery of Mosasaurus goes back all the way to the 1700s. When exactly in the 1700s appears to differ depending on the source you actually read, to the point that Calvin found himself confused at times. All the books he had read agreed that the first specimen was a set of jaws and was found in a limestone mine in the Netherlands near Maastricht. But the date is contradicted depending on the source. Nathalie Bardet and Jean Jat, I cannot pronounce his name, I apologize, in 1996 state it to have been found between 1770 and 1774. Darren Naish, in Ancient Sea Reptiles, says sometime in the 1770s, and that it's now on display in Paris's Natural History Museum. Sea Dragons by Richard Ellis states 1772 on page 195, but the description for an illustration on the very next page says 1780. There is also this quote from the Oceans of Kansas's website, which says, new information in his recent book, Mulder, from 2003, reported that the first mosasaur skull, somewhat less complete than the type specimen of Mosasaurus hoffmanni mantell 1829, was actually discovered in 1766 near St. Petersburg, Maastricht, and is still on exhibit in the Teylers Museum in Haarlem. Mulder also noted that the specimen of Mosasaurus hoffmanni, described above, was actually found between 1770 and 1774, not 1780, and was never actually owned by Dr. Hoffmann. According to Mulder, the Canyon Godding was the first legal owner. Hoffmann, however, was the first person who corresponded with other scientists of the day and who got the attention of Camper and Cuvier. End quote. And Oceans of Kansas, the second edition, published in 2017, it keeps the date as 1780, although states a second specimen was found several years before, but never received any attention. While the holotype got attention thanks to the military doctor J.L. Hoffmann, Ocean's Life in the Time of Dinosaurs tells something similar with different dates. The 2021 book states the first mosasaur documented was discovered in 1774, but a set of jaws had been found before in 1770. You can see these dates are getting tossed all over the place. And they are now on display at the Teylers Museum in Haarlem, in the Netherlands. Using the dates from Ocean's Life in Time of Dinosaurs, the 1774 specimen would later fall into the hands of the French in November of 1794. In the spring of 1795, it would make its way into the collections of France's Museum of Natural History in Paris, where it still resides to this very day. Known as Maastricht Unknown, naturalists of the time were quite interested to know what the 1774 specimen was. Some said a sperm whale. Others said a crocodile. George Cuvier would receive letters from one A.G. Camper who pointed out similarities between modern varanid lizards and Maastricht Unknown. So there's similars between these. I can never pronounce varanid, I apologize. Cuvier would write the first comprehensive description of what he called the great fossil animal of Maastricht in 1808. In 1822, the fossils would be given the genus name of Mosasaurus by W.D. Conybeare, but wouldn't get the actual species name hoffmanni from Gideon Mantell until 1829. The full name, Mosasaurus hoffmanni, it means Hoffmann's lizard of the River Meuse, referencing both the man who called scientists' attention to the fossil and a river in the Netherlands near the Maastricht. For some, these fossils were quite a curious find. Some believed these fossils, alongside ones from other marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, were relics from the Great Flood of the Bible. Others thought these bones represent animals that are alive but have yet to be found. Because no one believed in the extinction due to strong religious belief, God wouldn't let his creations die out. According to an episode of Monsters Resurrected titled T-Rex of the Deep, one person even believed the type specimen for Mosasaurus hoffmanni at the French Museum of Natural History actually represented the remains of a dragon killed by a medieval knight. Calvin watched an entire episode of Monsters Resurrected for this single video. He is definitely very, very mentally stable. And moving on from that, according to Darren Naish, Europe's mosasaur deposits weren't properly recognized until paleontologist Louis Dollo described several species from Belgium in the 1880s and 1890s. A little earlier in the United States, in the 1860s and 1880s, American fossil finders had started evacuating fossils of their own from New Jersey and Kansas chalk deposits. This was thanks, in part, to the paleontologists Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh, who are still starting to become reoccurring characters on this channel, and I am assuming that they will stay that for a very long time. And while Marsh and Cope helped to discover and document numerous specimens of Mosasaurus, Samuel Wilston wrote in the 1890s that 4/5 of all known mosasaurs at the time had to be thrown out. This was because of very poor descriptions and interpretations on Cope and Marsh's part due to their rush to name more species of fossil animals than each other, competing against each other for fossils. Unbelievable. This was annoying for paleontologists of the time, and their taxonomic lunacy was still being sorted out decades after both Marsh and Cope had died. While the taxonomy part is annoying, we can at least thank both of them for supplying so many mosasaur specimens. According to Mike Everhart, Kansas alone had uncovered over 1,000 mosasaur specimens of varying states of preservation. In 1911, a very famous Tylosaurus specimen was discovered, known as the Bunker Mosasaur, named after lead discoverer C.D. Bunker. Despite him and his men not being very experienced in excavating fossils, Bunker and his men did their best to unearth and store away every single bone they could get of the Bunker Mosasaur. The specimen now hangs in the entryway for the Natural History Museum of Kansas University, descending in a very S-like shape. In 1829, Major Benjamin O'Fallon's found a mosasaur fossil between Fort Lookout and Fort Pierre near the Great Bend of the Missouri River in South Dakota. Prince Maximilian of Weed later bought it from O'Fallon, who had it in his garden in St. Louis in 1845. A German paleontologist named August Goldfuss named it Mosasaurus maxillani after Maximilian. I can never pronounce these. I swear these are so complicated sometimes. 15 years beforehand, in 1830, the tip of the snout of a fossil skull was described as Ichthyosaurus missourianus, believed to be an ichthyosaur. The man who described it originally later had walked back that identification and believed it to have been from a mosasaur instead. The fun part about this little story is that the skull for the Mosasaurus maxillani holotype was missing the very tip of its snout, while the Ichthyosaurus missourianus, I cannot pronounce that, jeez, only had the tip of a snout as a holotype. It is currently believed that the snout tip is most likely from the M. maxillani holotype. And since then, two have become synonymized to become Mosasaurus missourianus. Whatever. Interesting case is that the Mosasaurus from Calvin's home country of Australia, something you probably haven't heard of unless you're a mosasaur enthusiast, mosasaurs are believed to have had a global distribution, but Australian mosasaurs are hardly talked about, and probably for understandable reasons. Quoting an Australian Geographic article, it says this group was one of the last to appear, not arriving until the inland sea retreated. and only known from the late Cretaceous rocks in WA, Australia. Has remains of two different-sized mosasaurs that belonged to two both known groups, but the fossils are not complete enough to be described as species. The fragmentary remains offer tantalizing hints about what is yet to be discovered. And in that quote, first discovered remains of Mosasaurus in Australia came in 1960, according to a 2005 paper by B.P. Keir and J.A. Long and J.E. Martin. The fragmentary remains of forelimbs found have affinities with Platecarpus, and based on Platecarpus, wouldn't belong to a 2.6 meter long animal. Another species would come in the form of three associated caudal vertebrae, which, they stated, belong to a 6 to 8 meter long mosasaur. The authors conclude their paper by saying that the fossil record of Mosasaurus in Australia is too poorly known to be definitive, but it adds an interesting chapter to the group's global distribution. Australia right now is mainly known for its plesiosaurs like Umunosaurus and Kronosaurus, so it'd be interesting to see if the future fossil excavations can turn up anything else in the way of mosasaur remains. More mosasaurs have also been found in Asia, Africa, South America, and Antarctica. In 2023, news headlines ran with a mosasaur from North America being named after the world serpent from Norse mythology, fitting for a group of animals often referred to as real-life sea serpents. The 2012 lecture of The Tale by Mosasaur stated that at the time there was 60 species of mosasaurs that were recognized, and that number has only grown since 2012.